Buddy heaters are a go-to in winter because they're portable, simple, and they feel like an instant fix. But most problems don't start with the heater itself. They start with how beginners use it. In cold weather, people seal up rooms, guess on fuel, and make it work with quick setups that quietly raise the risk. Here are the 7 most common winter mistakes and the practical habits that keep you warm without turning a backup heater into a hazard. Number 1. Trusting the label instead of the manual. A lot of people buy a buddy-style propane heater because the box and product pages use phrases like indoor safe, so they assume it's basically the same thing as a normal home heater. That assumption is where beginners get into trouble fast. These heaters are unvented, meaning all the exhaust stays in the same air you're breathing. Depending on the exact model, the exact manual revision, and even your location, the restrictions can look very different. Mr. Heater's own Buddy Family info calls out that some versions are restricted from all indoor use in Massachusetts and Canada, and restricted from use in dwellings in California. The point isn't to argue which state allows what. The point is, your specific heater's manual and local rules are the only yes or no that matters, not what a random comment says online or what a listing headline claims. Even within the Buddy lineup, the same name can hide different certifications and warnings. Some manuals describe the unit as an unvented camp heater for outdoor use and warn against using it in enclosed spaces like a home, tent, camper, or car. Other manuals talk about emergency indoor use with ventilation and specific room limits. If you miss that detail and treat every Buddy heater as a universal indoor appliance, you can end up using it in places the manufacturer explicitly warns against. That's not a small technicality.
It's the difference between temporary supplemental heat with fresh air and a carbon monoxide problem waiting to happen. So, before winter hits, do one boring but critical prep step. Pull up the manual for your exact model number, read the warning page, and check the clearance numbers, fuel connection rules, and any "where you can use it" language. If you bought it secondhand, don't guess. Download the correct manual from the manufacturer. And don't ignore local restrictions just because you're in a hurry. In a real outage, people tend to pile into smaller rooms, seal drafts, and run heat sources longer than planned. That's exactly when being sloppy with the rules gets dangerous. Once you're grounded in what the heater is and isn't meant to do, the next mistakes are easier to spot. Number 2. Treating it like a sealed room heater. Winter makes people want to button everything up. You cover drafts, close doors, tape plastic over windows, and suddenly your room is way tighter than it normally is. With an unvented propane heater, that nice and sealed feeling can be exactly what creates the hazard. The heater needs oxygen from the room to burn properly, and it also adds combustion byproducts back into the room. Buddy heaters have safety features like a tip-over switch and an oxygen depletion sensor, but beginners treat those like a force field. They're not. An oxygen sensor isn't the same thing as a carbon monoxide detector. It's designed to shut the heater down if there isn't enough fresh air for combustion. But carbon monoxide can build up for more than one reason, and you don't want your body to be the sensor. Early carbon monoxide symptoms can feel like a flu, headache, dizziness, nausea, so beginners write it off as tiredness or dehydration. If you're prepping for winter outages, plan for air and monitoring the same way you plan for fuel. A battery-powered carbon monoxide alarm is cheap compared to everything else in your kit, and it belongs in the space where the heater is used. Keep spare batteries for it and test it before the season. Also, don't place it where it's pointless. If the alarm is buried behind furniture, in a closed hallway or dead battery silent, it's just decor. Put it where people actually breathe and spend time. Fresh air matters too. Some manuals even mention a minimum fresh air opening size when troubleshooting nuisance shutoffs, because inadequate airflow can make the heater shut down or burn poorly. That's not a permission slip to run it in a sealed room. It's the manufacturer telling you the heater needs real ventilation to operate safely. If the heater keeps shutting off, don't treat it like an annoying quirk. Treat it like a warning that the environment isn't supporting clean burning. Also, don't block the heater's own air pathways. Keep the front, top, and bottom vents clear, and don't shove it into a corner to hide the glow. Restricted airflow can lead to dirtier combustion and more shutdowns. If you're trying to make heat safer, airflow and monitoring are the foundation. Without them, everything else you do is guesswork. Number 3, guessing on heat output and burning through fuel. A buddy heater can feel powerful when you're standing in front of it, and that's exactly why beginners overestimate what it can do for a whole room or a whole home. Most buddy-style units are in the 4,000 to 9,000 BTU per hour range, and larger big buddy versions can go higher. BTU is just a way to describe heat output. In plain terms, it's not a furnace. It's a space heater that works best when you use it to heat a smaller zone, not an entire building. The winter mistake is trying to fight a full house heat loss problem with a portable radiant heater. You put it in a big open living room, expect it to take over like central heat, and you end up running it on high all the time.
That burns fuel fast and still leaves you disappointed because the far side of the room stays cold. Radiant heat is directional. It warms what it sees first, people and objects in front of it, more than it warms air in the far corners. That's why positioning and zoning matter more than people think. A smarter prep mindset is zone heating. Pick one safe area you can keep warm, close off unused rooms, and reduce drafts in that one zone. Think of it as protecting your core living space, not heating every square foot. Insulation and wind blocking do more for comfort than cranking the heater to high. Even simple steps like sealing obvious leaks, using a door draft stopper, and keeping unused rooms closed can cut how hard you have to run the heater. Fuel math matters too, especially if you're building a stockpile. Also, be careful with the square footage numbers you see in ads. A rating like up to 225 square feet is usually a best-case situation. Decent insulation, average ceiling height, limited drafts, and a layout where the heater can actually radiate toward the occupied area. In a real winter outage, cold walls, wind, gaps you didn't notice, and people opening doors, the effective comfort zone can be much smaller. Planning for a smaller, controllable zone keeps expectations realistic and keeps you from running high non-stop just to chase an unrealistic room temperature target. On a typical portable buddy, the manufacturer lists roughly 3 hours on high and around 6 hours on low from a 1-pound cylinder. That sounds fine until you do the outage math. If you want about 8 hours of heat in a day, you're looking at roughly 1 to 3 1-pound cylinders per day, depending on whether you run low most of the time or you keep blasting high. Now stretch that across a 3-day winter storm, and you can see why beginners run out faster than expected. A 20-pound cylinder solves the constant swapping problem, but it creates new rules. Many manuals estimate something like 48 to 110 hours of runtime on a 20-pound tank, depending on setting, and they also warn that cold weather can cut that down hard. Continuous use below about 20 degrees Fahrenheit can reduce runtimes significantly because propane has a harder time turning into vapor fast enough, especially in smaller cylinders. So the plan isn't just get more propane. The plan is use less heat by wasting less heat. Altitude can also surprise people. Some manuals note that above around 7,000 feet, the heater may burn less bright or shut off because there may not be enough oxygen available for proper combustion. Beginners see that and assume the unit is defective, then start messing with it. In reality, it can be the environment. If you're at elevation, you need to build your plan with that behavior in mind and not depend on a single heater as your only heat source. This is where beginners either panic buy fuel at the last minute or start improvising with unsafe setups. The better move is to do a realistic runtime plan on paper. Decide how many hours per day you actually need supplemental heat, then match that to the fuel you can store safely. If your plan only works when everything goes perfectly, it's not a plan, it's a hope. Number 4, improvising the propane hookup. As soon as people realize 1-pound cylinders don't last long, they look at a 20-pound grill tank and think, easy upgrade. The problem is that beginners treat propane connections like garden hoses. They're not. Your heater is designed for a specific gas pressure and a specific type of supply, and the wrong hose or fitting can create leaks, poor combustion, or regulator damage. Start with the basics. These heaters are meant for vapor withdrawal, not liquid. That's why the cylinder and the heater are supposed to stay upright while operating. Tilting a tank, laying it down, or using the wrong type of cylinder can send liquid propane into parts that are only meant to handle vapor.
That can cause unstable flames, freezing regulators, and dangerous behavior. Then there's the hose setup itself. Some buddy manuals call out that certain hose connections have to be regulated to low-pressure propane, and that quick disconnect setups specifically must be regulated to the correct low-pressure level. If you slap on a random high-pressure hose or a mismatched quick disconnect, you can end up feeding the heater the wrong pressure. That's not more heat. That's a risk of malfunction and potentially a safety issue. Fuel filters are another beginner blind spot. The manufacturer lists an inline fuel filter accessory for buddy heaters and notes that it's recommended with specific hose assemblies and replaced annually. The reason is simple. Some hoses can release tiny amounts of oily residue that ends up in the heater's regulator and valve. When that happens, the heater starts shutting off, the pilot gets finicky, and people assume the unit is defective. A lot of "my buddy won't stay lit" stories are really "my setup contaminated the regulator." This is also where people start stacking adapters and third-party parts because they want a cheaper or faster solution. Many manuals warn against homemade or third-party accessories and attachments for a reason. A propane connection is not the place to experiment. Use the manufacturer-approved hose and filter for your model, and replace worn seals and O-rings instead of forcing a connection to kind of fit. One more thing beginners miss: how and where they connect and disconnect fuel. A lot of manuals tell you to attach or detach cylinders outdoors, away from ignition sources, and only when the heater is cool to the touch. That's basic safety. But during an outage, people do the opposite. They swap cylinders inside because it's warmer and faster. Don't build a plan that requires risky behavior. If your setup makes you want to do unsafe swaps, change the setup. Finally, leak checks are non-negotiable. Every time you connect a cylinder or hose, you want to check the connection. A simple soapy water test that shows bubbles is one of the easiest ways to spot a leak before it becomes a serious problem.
Don't rely on smell alone, because propane odor can be missed or masked, and some manuals warn about odor fading. If you ever suspect a leak, shut it down and deal with it first before you even think about lighting the heater. Number 5. Bringing big propane indoors or storing it wrong. Winter outages make people move gear around the house. That's when a lot of unsafe propane habits show up. A common beginner move is bringing a refillable 20-pound cylinder inside just for the night so it doesn't get stolen, or so it's easier to swap, or because they think the cold is the problem. Many heater manuals are very clear that refillable cylinders don't belong indoors. Propane is heavier than air, so if a valve leaks, gas can settle low and build up in places you might not notice right away. Storage is part of prepping, so treat it like a system. Keep cylinders upright in a well-ventilated outdoor area, away from heat sources and ignition sources, and according to local rules. Also keep them protected from physical damage. A dented or rusted cylinder isn't good enough for emergencies. Emergencies are when you most need your gear to be predictable. If you're using a remote cylinder and hose, don't leave it connected and then stash the whole thing in a closet or a basement. Some manuals specify that if the cylinder isn't disconnected from the heater and cylinder should be stored outdoors in a ventilated space. That's annoying, but it tells you how seriously they take the leak risk. The same logic applies to transportation. Don't toss cylinders loose in a trunk where they can roll, get damaged, or sit in a hot enclosed space. Cold weather brings another temptation: warming up a tank.
Beginners notice the heater running weak, see frost on the cylinder, and start looking for ways to heat the cylinder itself. Don't do that. Never use open flame, never place a cylinder next to the heater, and never try to jury-rig a warming setup. If propane supply is dropping in cold weather, the safer answer is usually changing your plan. Shorter burn cycles, a lower setting, better insulation, or a different approved heat source. Not trying to force the tank to behave. Practical prep detail. Label your cylinders. In a stressful outage, people waste time trying to guess which ones are full. A piece of tape that says full or empty, plus a simple rotation habit, keeps you from discovering too late that your stockpile is half spent. Also, store the small 1-pound cylinders thoughtfully. They're still pressurized fuel, and they don't belong next to pilot lights, space heaters, or anything that throws sparks. Number 6. Ignoring moisture, shutoffs, and warning signs. This one catches beginners off guard because it doesn't look like a dramatic failure at first. Unvented propane heat adds moisture to the air. Propane combustion creates carbon dioxide and water vapor, and when that water stays in the room, you can literally watch it show up on windows and cold walls. Here's the simple version. If you burn propane indoors, you're also adding humidity indoors. In winter, that humidity often turns into condensation, and condensation turns into damp gear, wet bedding, and eventually mold problems if it keeps happening. Even a small heater can add a surprising amount of moisture over time. A rough rule from basic chemistry is that burning 1 pound of propane makes around 1.5 pounds of water vapor. That means a handful of 1-pound cylinders over a couple of days can dump a lot of moisture into a tight space. So, if you're using any unvented heater as a temporary tool, you need a moisture plan, not just a heat plan. Ventilation helps with both carbon monoxide risk and humidity. So does keeping the heated zones smaller and warmer, because warmer air can hold more moisture without condensing instantly on every cold surface. Wipe down windows, crack ventilation as required,
and don't store wet gear in the same small space you're trying to keep warm. At the same time, pay attention to what the heater is telling you. Repeated shutoffs aren't just buddy heaters being picky. They can mean inadequate fresh air, a blocked pilot, or contamination in the regulator. Some manuals even list inadequate fresh air opening as a common cause when the heater keeps shutting off. At higher elevations, some manuals say the heater may shut off more often, and the response is to provide fresh air and wait before relighting. The theme is the same. When the heater complains, it's usually pointing at airflow or combustion quality. Flame appearance is another clue. You don't need to be a technician to notice when something looks off. A healthy pilot flame is typically blue, and the burner face should glow with minimal visible flame. If you see heavy yellowing, soot, strong odors, or flame where it doesn't belong, shut it down and get it checked. Dust, pet hair, lint, and spider webs can collect inside the heater over time, especially if it sits in a garage or shed all year. Then, the first time you fire it up in winter, you're trying to heat with something that hasn't been cleaned since last season. One more winter detail. Don't forget the support gear around the heater. Some buddy models use a built-in piezo igniter and don't need batteries to spark, while other buddy series heaters add a fan that needs batteries or an adapter to run. The heater can still make heat without the fan, but the fan can help spread warmth and reduce hot and cold spots.
If your model has that fan, put the right batteries in your preps and test the fan before you need it. Because a dead battery pack in the middle of a cold night is a very predictable beginner problem. The winter prep habit that fixes this is testing early. Don't wait for the storm. Test the heater before the season starts, in an appropriate location, so you can spot problems when you still have options. Also, never tamper with or bypass safety systems to keep it running. If the heater shuts off, assume it shut off for a reason and respond with ventilation, inspection, or professional service. Number 7. Creating a fire hazard with placement and supervision. The last set of beginner mistakes is about how the heater is positioned and how it's watched. Radiant propane heaters put out strong directional heat, and the front guard stays hot enough to burn skin and ignite the wrong materials if you crowd it. The manufacturer gives clearance distances for a reason. On a typical buddy heater, you're looking at about 30 inches of clearance above the unit, around 24 inches in front, about 6 inches on the sides, and basically no clearance at the back. Beginners break these clearances constantly because winter spaces get cluttered. Blankets, coats, sleeping bags, curtains, cardboard boxes, and plastic totes all migrate toward the warm spot. Placement matters beyond clearances. Use a stable, level surface so you don't rely on the tip-over switch as your main safety plan. Don't set it on surfaces that can be damaged or that make it unstable. Some floors and coverings can discolor from heat, and soft surfaces can shift. Also remember that the heater stays hot after shutdown. People burn themselves moving it too soon or packing it away while it's still hot. Drying gear on the heater is another classic mistake. People hang gloves over the guard or drape a towel near the front to speed it up. Even if it doesn't catch fire, it can block airflow and push the heater into dirtier combustion. Using the heater to warm food is also a bad move. Some manuals warn not to cook or warm food on the heater because it can interfere with safety systems and increase fire and carbon monoxide risk. A heater is a heater, not a stove. Room choice matters too. Some manuals that allow emergency indoor use still set limits for certain rooms, like only using low settings in bathrooms or limiting settings in bedrooms. Beginners ignore those limits because they want quick heat.
If you're even considering using a propane heater in a sleeping area, that's the moment to slow down and read what your manual actually permits. Because common sense guesses are usually wrong here. Supervision is the final piece. Many manuals say not to leave the heater unattended while it's burning and not to operate it while sleeping. In winter, that's exactly what beginners want to do. Set it and forget it so they can sleep. That's risky, even with tip-over protection. Tip-over switches can help if the unit actually tips, but they don't prevent every kind of accident. Someone can bump the heater, a pet can brush against it, or a draft can pull a curtain closer than you expected. If you need overnight warmth, focus your prep on insulation, safe bedding, and passive heat retention first, and treat any open flame heater as a temporary, attended heat source. Keep a basic fire extinguisher accessible, keep kids and pets away, and don't let "I'm cold" push you into shortcuts. Shut it down before you sleep, give it time to cool, and only then move or store it.